Good afternoon and welcome to the COMIT Happy Hour here on Friday the 29th of October at 3:30 p.m. Don't forget your clocks go back this weekend and we all get an extra hours laying in bed. Today we are very pleased to have a group of people who are going to talk to us about reality capture and looking at NavVis data. So we have Mike, Andy, John and Matt with us today. But first, before you get to meet the team, what I'm going to do is hand you over to Stuart for his usual briefing. But it's lovely to see you all again this afternoon. Stuart.
Thank you, Ian. And as Ian said, welcome to another edition of the COMIT Happy Hour. For those that are new, I'm going to talk you through what COMIT is. For those that have tuned in 100 times before, apologies. So COMIT is a collaboration platform. It's made up of owners, contractors, solution providers, and academics. COMIT has a unique history of developing and running projects and webinars with a focus on increasing productivity for better outcome. It's only by being collaborative with all of these stakeholders we can create value and enablement through process improvement, and by setting up and delivering all important demonstration projects. You'll see on the left-hand side of the screen some of the projects that are currently running. To name but a few, if you want to get involved, drop me a line. As I've said on previous occasions, it's not just the process and the technology, but it's about the people too. Okay, thank you for listening to that. And on to the next slide. Questions. People save the questions to the end, but if you want to fire questions in during the session, please do that. I'll encourage you to do that, and then we can be ready when it gets to question time. I see we've got a few questions already, so thank you very much for those. Now, normally at this point, I'll be starting to talk about poll questions, but we've done things slightly differently on this session. We decided we would do some questions at registration and I would share the results. So here goes, the next slide. And you should be able to see this now. Okay, so the question was, do you currently use or offer scan to BIM services? Now, hopefully this will come up through the animation. 76% said no, 24% said yes. Interesting.
I think that might be to do, Stuart, it might be to do with the accuracy and the speed of a lot of the scan systems that are out there, and also its capability of being able to register what you're seeing, as well as you know, the geometry of what you're seeing. So I think as technology improves, I think I can see those numbers moving the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to share the results of this afterwards. I thought it'd be good to do this at the beginning, and hopefully get some feedback from the guys. So the next question was this. We did ask 3 questions. The next question is, what do you value most when working with point cloud data for BIM? And the answers we got back were user friendliness at 9%, accuracy and quality at 23%, speed and efficiency 38%, compatibility with third-party software 12%, and other was 18%. Yeah, that's what I would have thought with the speed and efficiency. That's what a lot of people aim to get out of this in the first place. But hey, maybe the guys, when they come afterwards, they can comment on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right there, Stuart. I think speed and efficiency massively important, because we've seen a lot of the static collection processes and technology, and it does take an incredible amount of time, but you get really, really high accuracy. But for a lot of purposes, you don't need under sub-millimeter accuracy. What you need is 2 or 3 millimeters either way, not a problem. You just need to know that it's roughly there and what it is. Absolutely. So yeah, I would concur with that a lot.
Yeah. Okay, and the final question was, which of the following do you currently use? And we've just got 3. We've got 3 answers for this. So we've got Bentley ProjectWise, Autodesk BIM 360, and other. I don't know what the other is, so yeah, maybe we could pontificate later. But thanks to everybody that responded on that, much appreciated. Okay, so let me just move on now, and just before I introduce everybody, I want to introduce the topic. So today's session, so it's NavVis IVION Core, reality capture platform for AEC professionals using the NavVis VLX data. Okay, so what I will say is, following the introduction that was given by Andy, who you'll meet in a second at the recent Community Day, this presentation will show how using IVION you're able to increase efficiency when working with point clouds, and how IVION can enhance the value of measured data when feeding into the BIM common data environment. So I'm going to invite our panelists to turn the cameras on and join us. I'm going to start by introducing Mike Dutch, Senior Technical Account Manager at NavVis. We've got Andrew Baines, Account Executive at NavVis. We've got John. Welcome, John. John is a lead surveyor, consultant and advisor at Metron. And we've got Matt Cunliffe, and Matt's a director at YourCAD and a director at SiteDesk. Welcome, Matt. I can see everybody. Okay, so thanks guys for joining us. Thanks for participating and helping set up the session. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Mike, and Mike's going to take us through the demonstration and introduce us to NavVis IVION Core. So I'm going to turn my camera off and my microphone. I'm going to leave it with you, Mike, and we'll join you for the questions at the end. So,
great,
Mike, it's over to you.
I can get GoToWebinar working on my side.
Oh, we've done the test. We've done the test. Over to you.
Great, so hopefully you guys are seeing our software loaded into a web viewer. Can someone else on the webinar confirm that's what everyone can see?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks, Dr. Stewart. And as Stuart's mentioned, the session today is going to cover NavVis IVION Core, our software that is a web-based platform. It was interesting to see how some of you folk had answered the pre-session questions. So talking around being able to get point cloud data as quickly as possible with a really high quality is obviously very interesting for NavVis folk. So we specialize in mobile mapping systems and being able to deliver data quality similar to a static scanner, but at 10 times the speed. What we're going to look at here, as Stuart mentioned, is the software or a part of the software side of the NavVis technology suite. This is essentially the resting place for all your reality capture data. So a lot of what we're going to look through here is data captured by NavVis systems, but by no means is this closed off. NavVis IVION can take point clouds from many different types of systems as long as you're in open file formats. So this is the main screen that will hit when we first load in NavVis IVION. So I'm simply using a URL and accessing the instance with user credentials. Everything in IVION is protected by user credentials and controlled in that exact way. So if I have rights to see certain sites within this instance, I will see them as I log in with my credentials. If I've hidden some from Stuart, he might not be able to see them when he logs in. And that lets you really control whether different clients are all going to be up on NavVis IVION, or there's just different stakeholders and you're guiding them to certain areas that they're more interested in. And what we can also see here is there's multiple site locations. I'll zoom into Germany. So the HQ of NavVis is based in Munich, but we do have offices in Shanghai, New York, and LA as well. But this is HQ. and we've got a few other sites that we'll jump into as well. And these individual sites, as I mentioned, have got unique user permissions wrapped around them. So if I wanted someone to be an editor in one location, they can be. They also have unique spatial reference systems around them as well. So there's no need for all of the data to be on the same type of grid. As you saw, it's a global setup, so there couldn't be. But each individual site can have a custom spatial reference system or a standard one selected from a pick list. And what I'll do here is jump into the first location. So I'm going to jump into a production plant. If I can find the right one, let's go into the list and pick this way. Great. So I just jump into a location here. This might take a moment or two to load. Hopefully it loads nice and easily through GoToWebinar. I'll go slowly and give it time to catch up. So when we first jump into a site location, what we see is a 360 pano. These have been captured with NavVis technology. As you're walking around capturing the mobile LiDAR data, you're also capturing high resolution 360 panos. And this allows us to, I guess, understand the reality capture data in a way that is accessible to most people, even if they've never seen a point cloud before. We also have 2D maps. So these are generated as part of our post-processing workflow. So these are colored maps based on the imagery that's been captured and the point cloud data, meaning that we get a really good understanding of exactly where we are and exactly where we could potentially jump to. So we can see these different location markers here all represent 360 panos that I can go ahead and jump into and get a better understanding of that location. So as I spin around now, hopefully it's keeping up with you guys and it's still working okay for you. Let me get us in a good spot and then I can stop us. So we can see here the 360 panos as well as the 2D views, and I can continue to jump around through multiple ones, and I can jump up from the 360 views as well. However, I'm not going to do that here. I'll let it all catch up on GoToWebinar. But what I will say is you might notice my mouse, for example, has a little cursor around it and it's moving based on the surfaces that I'm touching. So we're not actually just looking at an image. The point cloud is very much in the background in a very lightweight form, which means I can jump around without having to wait for everything to load. But it also means all the geometric information that I derive from IVION is coming from a very precise point cloud in the background. So one example that we can do is take a quick measurement. So let me just drag this guy out here so you can see it in 2D as well. So as I mentioned, we'll see the 2D maps, so we have an understanding of the exact orientation of where I'm looking. I can shrink that down and just focus on 3D. And I can take some quick measurements as well here. So I can do freehand measurements, fixed horizontal and fixed vertical. I'll just do a simple fixed vertical measurement here. And in the zoomed in view, you can see straight away that we're zooming into the point cloud data, not on the imagery, to take this measurement because it's going to be much more accurate from the point cloud data. So if I just do my fixed vertical measurement here, now you can see we've got a measurement being taken and it's been added to the list here on the right. If I wanted to, I could write a quick description about it. If it was particularly interesting, I could go ahead and save it for next time. And I can even share it out with other people that might be using the instance. So here we can see it's broken down in a really logical way. I know I'm in building plant D and floor EG. I also have a link, so I could even share this in something like GoToWebinar, and whoever clicked on this, as long as they had the right access credentials, would jump into this location and we could start making decisions based on these measurements in a call rather than having to actually be there physically on site. So that's a little bit around the measurement tool and the fact that we're definitely using the point cloud in the background. Another tool that is particularly useful, especially with regards to the point cloud, is being able to crop and download sections of the point cloud. So we've got crop and download just here. We've got a jazzy tutorial, but luckily you guys don't need that. I'm on the call. But what we can see here, again, we're seeing the 2D colored maps, giving us that context of the full facility. And then a little bounding box here that's allowing us to really chop into the point cloud and extract just the information that we want, rather than dealing with the full point cloud, or point cloud, sorry, because this is multiple data sets. I can also flip into 3D if I need to. And this will probably take a while to load on Teams, but we'll give it a second. You can see here, I can export this point cloud data with a site coordinate system. So as I said, each individual site does have a reference system if it needs to. I can choose a different one if I wanted to, or just keep it like a local data set without real world coordinates. And I can export all this in open file formats. So definitely not trying to play the ecosystem-like game. Open file formats, you can extract from the system and import them as well. I could obviously chop this down if I wasn't necessarily interested in that roof structure, and just hit download, and the download would start instantly. Okay, so that's a little bit of getting some data out and a little bit of the point cloud in the background. I also did want to show you guys some of our points of interest. So if I just jump out of this site and jump into another one, you can see here it's really quick and easy to jump between lots of different locations. So I'll jump into this site here. And again, I'll probably give it a minute or two just to load up. So again, we drop straight away into the 360 panos. And this is how we can jump around the data. Again, very simple and user-friendly. Anyone in an operation and maintenance team will be able to get around this data and navigate nice and easily. But what I wanted to show you was these points of interest. You might notice some of these icons down on the 2D map. They'll also be in 3D as well. And these are locations that have been specified by the user. So they've been picked out as a spot of additional information. And this additional semantic information can be very simple. It could just be a block of text, or it can be from multiple different sources. So what we're seeing in this example here is somebody's included a nice PDF, some type of product manual for this machine, as well as some specific information about parts and components that have been used during this setup. And so this is some images that have been embedded in, as well as the PDF. We can also, I'm not going to play videos, because one thing we definitely know over webinars is videos never work out well, but we can also embed videos inside these points of interest as well. So in this example, it's a bit of a how-to manual. So if someone is going to be doing the same task again and again, ideally we can just take a quick video of it, and someone then is able to play this and understand what this piece of machinery is meant to do and how to operate it. So again, nice and straightforward. And even if the application is nice and straightforward, so someone here has got a great idea to put everyone's name item name tags up here against this piece of machinery, so even low-tech solutions can get highlighted here as well. One thing to mention about the points of interest, so just like the measurements, they can be shared out with links so that anybody that has user credentials can log in, jump, and understand what is happening in terms of the points of interest, the asset semantic information, and make decisions based on that. You might see here as well, we can also route. So this is particularly interesting. So how would I get from an entrance? And you can see as I just type a few letters in, there's a dynamic search here, and it will look through all other points of interest that are up in this site location. So we can see here, I've got an entrance to, okay, it was a very short distance, but we can see on the 2D map, a navigation has taken place. How do I get from this entrance to the machinery that I'm most interested in? I would say this route is not the route somebody has walked with the scanner. This has been derived from the point cloud data afterwards, hence why it's doing active avoidance of things to collide with. But this, can travel off multiple floors and throughout a building if needs be. So this routing information can be really, really powerful. And then the last point I wanted to mention around the points of interest was potential integrations with other sources. So we have some of our current customers that will do additional integrations up on IVION. And this is an example of a simple third-party application where somebody has got live information about this piece of machinery. So we can see here it's active. Richard Lang's still not finished on a Friday yet, he's working away. But we can also see some live maintenance information. So I just click on maintenance here. We can see the work order backlog associated with this piece of machinery. We could give poor Richard some additional work to do here as well and submit a work request. And right at the bottom, you can see there's an IoT sensor that's hooked up to the device as well. And we can see that everything is running, is definitely working because the system is vibrating away. But this kind of is just scratching the surface of really what you can do with points of interest when it comes to connecting different software platforms and even different databases. We do have a full and extensive API for the front end and back end, which our customers use to build bespoke applications for. So that is a bit of a whistle-stop tour through NavVis IVION. I hope I didn't go too quickly, and I hope the screen and everyone's internet speed kept up with me. But I think now if we move into the panel discussion, and Stuart, I'll try and pass the presentership back to you.
Thanks, Mike. That was a fabulous trip round. I'm sure that's generated 1,000 questions. We haven't got time for 1,000, but
yeah, it's Friday.
Yeah, we do have the extra time facility, of course. Can I bring everybody back in? John, Matt, Ian, Andy. Okay. Let me just. Okay. I'm just wanting to. I've got to change screens around here. Just bear with me a second, guys.
I'm still not 100% certain if I'm still displaying my screen or not.
Yeah, you're still there.
You're still there, but the screen's not. So we're all right.
Nice one.
Yeah, and I've just lost my control panel, but let me just get it back. Sorry about that. I've got questions on one screen, and okay, here we are. Right. Thanks, guys. I think that was fabulous. What I did while you were out, I brought those other questions across that we got from the registration page. So I will share that again because I know you're dying to comment. So I'm sharing my screen now. I'm hoping you can see the question time tab. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Great. All right. Lovely. All right. As somebody asked me earlier, I believe that is Matt Hancock, and there's no association with anybody on the panel. But anyway. So
it's a similar name. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Listen, I thought that was great. I know Andy and Mike, you'd worked together to present that. I thought it was great, and it was a sort of natural follow-on from the community day. Apologies that not everybody could have seen that attended the community day, but I've got some questions here, and I've got questions coming in. I've got this on another screen, but I've got some questions that I think Andy and Mike would like to answer. And the first one that I've got here is how quickly can you access the digital twin of your building? Now, Mike, do you want that? Does Andy want that? I'll leave it to you guys to decide. Maybe you both will answer it.
I don't mind taking it.
Okay.
So in terms of capturing the data, I know we didn't really talk about it in this session. We were just looking at the digital twin up on NavVis IVION. So captures incredibly quickly with NavVis technology, up to around 10 times faster than static-based scanning. Usually all the data is processed within that evening, and the next day requires a couple of hours of the post-processing steps to set some of the additional building characteristics up. And then once that is finished and NavVis IVION has been set up, it's instantaneous. So what we just ran through there's not a secret local installation on my machine. I was connecting to a real instance using a web-enabled device. So any web browser, as long as you've got the right user credentials and the URL to access the instance, it's instantaneous.
Fabulous. Okay. Anything you want to add to that, Andy?
Oh, Andy, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you, but yeah. Okay. No, still can't hear you.
I don't think he's actually making any words. He's just trying to get out.
Yes, he doesn't want to answer the question.
While you're sorted, can you
go on? Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, loud and clear, yeah.
Ah, perfect. No, I've not really got a great deal to add to that. Mike's covered it beautifully. As he said, the data capture process is very simple. It's very quick. All I would say is if you've done multiple scans during the day, once you've uploaded them to NavVis IVION, they'll parallel process. So you're not waiting for an awful long time for one scan to process, then the next. They will all process simultaneously and be there ready for you, usually the following day if you've done a large amount of scanning. So an overnight time frame is probably realistic if you're talking about the sort of instance and environment that Mike has just shown you within IVION.
Okay, great. The next question I've got here is from Nick. Nick's asking, what hardware do you use to capture this point cloud? Is it bespoke NavVis hardware?
Yeah, so in the examples that we just covered in NavVis IVION, that was using NavVis technology. So the NavVis VLX, which was launched a good couple of months ago, I want to say maybe like 18, 19 months ago, maybe even a bit longer. And that has got 2 LiDAR units as well as 4 cameras in a camera array above the person capturing the data. Those are the 360 panos that we were viewing there. But as I did mention, we're definitely not playing like a closed ecosystem type game. If you did have point cloud data from other sources, as long as they're in open file formats like E57, you can also import that data into NavVis IVION as well. And if you have point normals, you can use them for registration purposes as well.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So I've got one more question before I bring Matt and John into this. The question is from, let's add into Nick's actually. Nick, I hope that answered your question, but the next question I've got here is how does IVION interact with other software? Mike?
Yep, I can take it. Yep. So there's a few different ways really. So like we just saw with the points of interest, in a sense, it offers multiple opportunities to do additional integrations. So on a kind of simple approach, you could imagine if you had all your document management systems stored in a system like SharePoint, embedding SharePoint links inside your points of interest allows you to connect the reality capture information that we see from the NavVis technology with an already very rich database you might have somewhere else. But we do have, as I mentioned, the extensive API for the front end and back end. So if there are connections that would definitely provide value, something that needs that kind of geospatial element added onto it, there are connections that our customers build for themselves. So just like that third-party integration point of interest I showed, that is definitely possible. So all of our customers do get access to the API, and that includes kind of skeleton applications, even half-made applications for people to just pick up and use.
Okay, great. I have another question about size, but I'll come on to that in a minute. I'm going to bring Matt in if I can. Matt, if you can turn your microphone on, and John, I'll follow up. I've got some questions for you as well. Just on the questions front, please keep your questions coming in from the floor. We've got some great questions here. I think Fran, you're winning the race here. We've got quite a lot of questions and some statements, some really good statements, which I'll try and read out if there's time. But thank you, Fran, and everybody else that sent them in. But please keep them coming. So Matt, okay, so how could you see a person mounted system being of use within a complex environment that you may find in your experience? Do you want to talk through that? Oh no, we can't hear you. You need to unmute.
I've obviously passed gremlins on to Matt, I think.
No.
I think he doesn't want to answer the question.
There he is.
I'm in the room now. Yeah.
You're in the room. Over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so those of you who may not have seen, I mean, if you have a quick look on NavVis.com, you can see the man-mounted system that NavVis deploys. So of particular interest sort of to myself and Mr. Miskimian, because of our background, obviously being Royal Engineers. So we deal with some pretty interesting environments where sort of terrestrial type scanning and things like that are a little bit sort of tricky to deploy. Certainly one of interest is tunnel systems. So for instance, out in Gibraltar, we were looking at sort of their fuel lines there, and there's kilometers of tunnel system inside the actual rock itself. Now, capturing that certainly with terrestrial scanning is very time consuming. Even with the sort of other systems that are kind of out there, it can be a little tricky to capture. Certainly on the RGB capture, which is something, although not obviously played with NavVis kit, but aware that the RGB captures are much better and much more defined on the actual point cloud delivery itself. Whereas I've had troubles in the past with sort of SLAM-based kit. But it's mainly that sort of easier access to be able to dig into spaces, being a little bit more able to be aware of your surroundings, that really sort of interests me. Now, the crossover to that is certainly on the kind of sort of site capture side, just being able to walk around the site, being able to have your hands free a little bit more sort of safety, and capturing a lot more sort of detail, again with a really good RGB overlay. It's definitely of sort of interest with ourselves. We are going to be looking at some sort of deployments with NavVis, playing about within a bit of a green environment, hopefully sometime soon. So, yeah.
Good. I'll look forward to hearing all about that, Matt. I've got a. Go on, Matt. Ian.
Matt sort of alluded to there was the limitations, I think, of both the terrestrial and the SLAM type technology. I think one of the things that is really frustrating with SLAM has always been the repeating surfaces and glass. Both are always, whenever I get the results from SLAM, I'm always disappointed with what I see. What I'm hoping here, and I've seen some of the results that you've created, that we're going to see a much more improved product coming out of that, purely because you've got a better way of capturing data.
Yeah, if I could chime in a little bit on that there, guys. So I think you're definitely right. There seems to be an element of once you've been able to position yourself well, you've got an algorithm that works, that's all you need to do. And hopefully what we showed today from the NavVis perspective is it's more about a full stream, more about a full solution. That in part definitely does include a processing stack on images. So we do things like white balance adjustment to make sure the point cloud colorization is as good as it can be. And we do things like dynamic object removal. So if you're walking away and a passerby is walking past you, we all know what that means. That's generally a load of useless points or confusing points in the point cloud. And automatically we will try and remove that person as they pass you through you in the final point cloud data. So by no means does our work stop after we've got the initial point cloud. We're still making it as nice and user-friendly as possible.
Just on that thought process, I don't know whether this is a random question or it's valid. What about vegetation and trees and things that, you know, you're walking along, but obviously trees and vegetation and things like that will move slightly with breezes and stuff like that. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, so being outside, in a sense, is like it's a new step for NavVis. So in the past, we would say we build indoor mobile mapping systems, IMMS. However, over the past few months, there's been major leaps in our SLAM algorithm, and now we can take the VLX system inside and outdoors. And we do have a special configuration just for outdoor mode when you're capturing data outside that will do things like optimize the algorithm to take into account some of the features that you just mentioned.
Brilliant, fantastic, thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry, if I can just jump in just with one final point.
Yes,
on
go
that.
on, Andy, yeah, go on.
The VLX also has the advantage of mounted on it, one in the XY plane and one in the Z plane. So with those two sensors constantly recording in both planes, it allows you to have a much more robust SLAM. So whilst you're moving in that environment, outdoor environment, you are constantly positioning yourself. Whereas with some other mobile mapping units, you only have one sensor, which is rotating in both planes. Doesn't give you quite so much data to work with in a SLAM environment. So you don't sometimes have quite so much confidence, shall we say, of the scanner is at any given time.
Sure. Okay, Andy. Lots of questions. Apologies, there is a bit of overlap with some of the questions, but I suppose there always is when we're this technical. Continuing the practical theme, and on the practical front, John, I've got a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
You're using the tech day in, day out.
Yeah.
Tell us more from a practicing point of view about how you can obtain a complete data set, and how you can handhold the technology to get yourself into tight areas.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I think the great thing about the NavVis technology compared to static scanning is you're continually capturing data as we walk around. So you do tend to, you cover most of the building, most of the buildings we work in, you're covering most of that as you go. Whereas originally there would have been lots of gaps in the scanning, which would have taken us just too long to fill in. So by having this continual walking process, you do get that very full model of whatever you walk around. It's also just some of the points you had earlier about we often work in warehouses and shops, the sort of dynamic object removal, where there are people walking around and all that gets taken out. So you end up with a very, very clean data set as well. And obviously there's a lot of work that goes on in the processing to achieve that. But the quality of the final data is very good, the color's very good. So, you get a really good result. And in terms of using it in, again, find that we load it daily and have guys working on it the next day doing the CAD, which works really well for us because a lot of our work is very, very fast turnaround. So we're on site one day, the guys will be working on the CAD the next day and we're delivering the following day. Just the nature of some of the work we do, it's that demanding. We'll be on site, we'll be on 4 or 5 different sites a week, and we may have to deliver by the end of that week or the beginning of the following week. So the technology, one has to capture everything around because you can't go back, and it also has to be good data that you can share with people, and the colorization means it's easy for third parties to understand. And also the great thing about the IVION is the sort of photography element that again we can share with people who've not been on site, and the CAD team love that, because instead of just having this set of disorganized photographs, they've got this lovely organized tool which is generated pretty quickly. So yeah, we're really impressed with the technology. We've been running it for 9 months, and I just think it's marvelous and can't understand why everyone isn't using it.
And And you're smiling, fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant, thanks for that. Lots of questions coming in. Let me just read out the next one from Alex. To protect against occlusion, what kind of monitoring is used in the collection of the environment? Okay, I think I've read that correctly. Alex, if I need to do that, just drop me a note.
No, that makes sense. So
yeah,
on the VLX, Stuart, you've got a screen with a real-time display of the data that you're capturing. So as you're carrying out the scan on the VLX, you are seeing the point cloud effectively build up on screen in front of you, and therefore you can spot any areas of the project which you may not have covered, and therefore you can reduce your potential occlusions. The screen on the VLX also allows that direct interaction, so that you can see where photographic capture points are taken along your walk.
Okay.
And you also have the ability to interact with the display, add control points, etc.
Right. Okay, just following on from that, also from Alex. Thank you, Andy, for that. Is this system capable of item identification and localization? I think you might have touched on this before, Mike. An example is the ability to identify and list locations of, say, sprinkler heads or exit signs. Mike?
Yeah. So for us, the semantic information is really focused on our points of interest. And these points of interest are created by the person doing the post-processing up in IVION. So essentially picking these individual points. In terms of an automated feature extraction, that's not something we do up in NavVis IVION. These features would have to be picked by the person running the post-processing. That being said, if there was a database of all the sprinkler locations, names, and semantic information, we can import points of interest from old school technologies like Excel and CSVs. Okay,
thank you for that. I've got another one here. It's a plaudit and a question, and this is from Matt. Thank you, Matt. The NavVis team came down to an event I was on and did a scan of an old fort. The wearable system was so intuitive. Someone with no experience started collating data and within minutes could see where they had been. Looked really good. My question is, does the NavVis system allow comparison of data? Again, apologies, I know you've touched on this, a bit of overlap. Comparison of data, so a weekly scan can highlight the changes. I would say, yeah. Who wants to take that, Andy or Mike?
I don't mind taking it. Or have you got it, Andy?
Mike, do you want to go for it? Sorry, my broadband's playing up a little bit.
Yeah, so when it comes to comparing and at least logging change over time, one thing that's really crucial for us is the use of control points. So if you have surveyed in control, whether they're checkerboard targets or any kind of physical target that you connect the VLX to, we can capture those points during acquisition. So when everything's processed, whether you processed it in January and then capture those same points again in March, when everything's processed, all the data is going to be in the right location relative to one another. So that's really crucial. And when it comes to putting those data sources next to one another, you can store multiple data sets up on these sites that I showed you in IVION, so they can be stored next to one another. We don't do any comparison or change maps with an IVION. That would be done in a different software platform.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can just add on to that, that's all right, sorry.
Go on, carry on.
It's a great question, to be honest, because it's something we're coming across quite a lot in regards to sort of asset management and long-term retention of things. Certainly, again, almost getting back to the sort of military side, we have quite a lot of things that are falling apart. So it's this big thing we've identified is the point cloud capture at time points to be able to understand where settlement and things are changing. Got a couple of tasks we're actually looking at. There's there is some software out there that can do some sort of analytics on things. However, certainly when you are starting to talk about the type of change, it's more how you interact with the data rather than just having a machine that can say things. So it's quite an interesting ground of sort of machine learning to bring up that, to understand, well, is that settlement, is it a shift in the actual scan, or what type of structural sort of change it is. I think it'll be a long time until we get proper software that really covers that, as it's still quite a sort of expertise sort of trade to be able to bring into that personally. So yeah.
Okay, thanks Matt. I've got another question here from Matt Simmons. Thank you for your question. Well, it's a statement, I suppose. I am a current serving Royal Engineer. We look at the possibility of using this type of visual output in the Middle East. The major obstacle was security. This was mainly centered on the security of data being processed over potentially insecure networks. We struggled with host nation and coalition partners' approvals. Thanks for that, Matt. I don't know whether anybody wants to comment on that. Anybody got anything you'd like to say around the issue of security and approvals?
I think this is not just a metric problem, guys. I think this is also a critical national infrastructure, because if I was doing this work on any sort of power station or any of our infrastructure as a whole in the UK, we can't process that kind of data, and it can't be stored and held outside of the UK. It's a no-no. Simple as that, because these are the kind of things that other organisations around the world who want to cause harm to the UK might want to access. Okay, so being able to process that data on a UK-based server, and specifically if you're looking at the military, and also if you look at some of the more sensitive national infrastructure, that kind of data would have to be processed within our own server farms or within our own secure cloud, which the MOD has got one.
Yes, this is something that sort of me and Ian have been working quite a bit on, and I'm sure I'll catch you next week, Matt, at the Tech Symposium. But it is a very tricky one, certainly with sensitive data. So some of the things sort of me and Ian have been talking about is sort of local 5G networks, to be able to sort of capture data and getting it back to a local area to it. And unfortunately, this is the kind of trade-off with NavVis. The thing I find very useful about NavVis's sort of generation and working platform is you don't need that 128 gig of RAM on a local machine on a laptop at site to generate the data. You just need access to a cloud, which is fantastic certainly for a civilian point of view. Certainly from my side, sort of having I'll say I've had 2 machines go down this week because the GPUs are burnt out. So if I just needed a simple screen pretty much and something that's got a processor in just to actually view point cloud data, then fantastic. But certainly on obviously the security aspect, it's pretty much local network for big sets of insecure data, sensitive data at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Next question I've got here is from Samir. Thank you for your question. How do we address the energy
Stuart,
and sustainability?
Stuart, before we move on, sorry to interrupt. Before we move on to the next question, just to touch on that point around security. From our side, our servers are covered by a good few ISO standards, and recently we did pass a TISAX audit, so a trusted information security asset exchange review of the way we store our data. And for those that do have to operate in very secure environments, like Matt and Ian just mentioned, there is alternative solutions as well.
Okay, thank you. Samir sent a question in. How do we address the energy and sustainability issues using BIM Point Cloud? Who wants to take that? Did you hear that?
Yeah.
So is that more the... Sorry, go on, John. Sorry.
We've been doing some work with an energy company on sort of retrofitting houses, commercial properties, places like that, and obviously using the sort of NavVis system gives you that very quick data capture and saves numerous visits by lots of different peoples, which again is a more sustainable model, and that's been working quite well and is being taken up as a sustainable way of sustainably developing properties and making them more energy efficient. So with that in a simple way is kind of a way we're addressing that.
I believe, I mean, we had obviously a conversation the other day, and I believe that NavVis is looking at sort of additional equipment to put on the man-portable device. So certain things because unfortunately photogrammetry isn't the be-all and end-all. There's a lot of extra data there, so like the thermal sort of side and everything. I can't remember, I didn't actually ask you the other day. Is thermal imaging something you're looking to capture quite soon as well? Andrew or Mike, sorry.
Not on our current roadmap. I think we're pretty happy with the VLX as it is. So thermal's not something that we're planning on introducing to the VLX version 2, which just came out. But building on what John said there, yeah, well, if you're considering the data that we capture in a sustainable manner, then the ability to add points of interest into IVION, where you can tag things like boilers and houses, and essentially do condition survey, maintenance survey, kind of allows companies to monitor their assets and their facilities from a centralized location and ensure that they're getting the maximum economic benefit out of them and ecological benefit out of them too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Example of this we did a few years ago on one of the COMIT projects was we did an infrastructure assessment of a wastewater treatment plant. And not only did we look at standard photogrammetry and laser scanning and drones and all sorts of other cool stuff, we also took a thermal imaging down there. When we were doing the thermal imaging, we were able to not just see what was going on, but also see what was going wrong on that site. And one of the really cool things was we were able to see one of the bases of the aeration tanks. It's built in a marsh, and it was built 100 years ago, whatever it might be. I think it was 120 years ago. But the point here was the thermal imaging showed us that the piles underneath the settlement tank had actually started to punch up through the base of the settlement tank because the ground had been sagging around it. Okay, but we couldn't see that visually. We could only see it because of the thermal imaging. And the other parts, as we were going around the site, we could see things like a pump overheating. We could see cracks in concrete. We could see leaks in tanks because of the distinctive change in that thermal image. So the power you've got there is not just in it's a nice to have and it's good information to store, but actually if you're doing this on a frequent basis, you're able to see what is happening with these things and whether something is overheating, which might cause a fire, something is leaking, concrete is cracking, all these things. I think the thermal side of scanning, photogrammetry, etc., is something that we're not picking up on soon enough, I don't think.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left. I want to just finish off with some more questions. Okay, so I've got one question here. It's to do with size. How large can your project be within IVION? Mike, is that a question for you, or is that a question for Andy?
I'll leave it for Andy.
Go on then.
That's fine. IVION's entirely scalable, so we grow our IVION sizes according to the needs of the customer, essentially. So if you want to keep things simple with IVION and use it as a processing software and draw down your point cloud directly after your project, then you can keep the instance size quite small. However, if you want to host multiple sites on your project and continue to share those with your customers, then we can grow IVION accordingly. And we have some customers who are sharing huge amounts of data and hosting huge amounts of data that staggers into the millions of square meters. And that's not a problem for us. So we're entirely scalable on that side.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I just want to make mention. I've got a few more plaudits here. Fran says always happy to join the happy hour, but it's a bit early for me to celebrate with a scotch here in the US. Sorry about that. We'll come on later next time. I think that's in reference to your statement, Ian, earlier.
Oh,
but hey, onwards
this afternoon.
Yeah. I got a question for John here.
Yeah, sure.
Staff working remotely, having good access to the cloud delivers a huge advantage. Obviously, are we talking 4G, 5G? Are we talking the usual sort of internet? Are we talking in the field? How are we actually making the connections?
A lot of our staff working on the road, we actually find hotels these days have really good broadband speeds at a very simple level, and it's for us it's always upload speed. Anything above 10 meg a second will upload overnight for you. So that's the way we're doing most of it. I guess as the 5G networks develop, we'll push more stuff over that way. But in terms of downloading, most people's home broadband will download the data pretty quick. And these days, if you've got any sort of cable connection in, you get a decent upload speed, so you can upload and download quickly. So it was a problem perhaps a year ago. It'll be less of a problem in 6 months or a few months' time when we've all got 100 megabits a second and goodness knows what.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's a bit of a plug, I suppose, for the 5G project that we've got running, because these are the sort of applications that really need, you know, reliable connections, and something that can take the width as well. Okay, so I just want to say thanks to everybody that came in and asked questions on the registration. We've got Alex Hilstowski from University of New Brunswick. Very much looking forward to the presentation. You were curious about the impression of evolving SLAM and mobile devices. I'm hoping that question has been answered. I certainly know it was touched on. If not, then we can address that again afterwards. Matthew Simmons, Royal Engineers, I know you've asked a question already, but thanks again for your questions and coming on today. Much appreciated. We've got Lorraine Uma from Penn State. Yes, there will be a recording. I get asked this quite a lot, but yes, there is. Give me a few days and I'll put it on the website. We've got we've got another question here from actually John Sakus. How quick can the data be converted to a mesh? I think you mentioned this earlier, guys. Did you say overnight, or was it a matter of hours? I suppose it depends how big it is, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, so one point there, just like Andy mentioned, when you're talking about volumes of data up on the cloud, we are processing everything in parallel. So even if you have collected buckets and buckets of data, it'll all get processed at a similar time. For us, processing involves the stack that I mentioned on the panoramic images and the colorized point cloud, and potentially including control points if needs be. But at that point, we have images and we have the point cloud data. So we don't create a mesh, but we do have the point cloud. That point cloud has got things like normals and stuff attached to it, and that can be used in a different tool to generate a mesh.
Okay, well, I hope that's answered your question, John. We've got another plaudit, always learning and excited to see the possibilities. That's from Jason Borg at Aptim in the US. From Kim Arendt, also from Aptim in the US. Very interesting ability to attach data to the point cloud and the mesh and the third-party software interoperability. I've got another one from Slawomir Palat, company Virtuosity, which is a Bentley company in Poland. Mainly interested in the possibility to use NavVis data together with the photogrammetry in our software context capture. Hope you enjoyed the session today, and I'm pretty sure the question's been answered. But anybody want to add anything to what I've just said? Is there any thoughts and observations before we close out? No? Okay.
I think just purely from what I saw at the commit day and what I've seen today, this is, I think, is going to be a game changer in this world, purely because the speed at which you can capture information which is accurate enough to make decisions, take actions, do your maintenance, do your facilities management, and just not have the burden of over accurate point clouds, which I don't need, or slightly sort of liquid photogrammatic sort of images which don't really add a huge amount of value to what I'm trying to do. So I think the meshing of these two together and the level of accuracy and the ease of use that we've got I think this is going to change what's going on, and so I watch this with great interest.
Okay, fabulous. Well, listen, I just want to skip through the closeouts and the thank yous, if I can do that. I did mention the next question, which was, if I can just bring the thing up on the screen. Before I get onto the next slide and do the thank yous, is there any comments and observations on what you see there? And I'm particularly aiming this at Andy and Mike. Any thoughts? Anything you want to say in addition to what we said earlier?
Well, I guess.
I don't think there's anything very surprised, to be honest.
Oh, sorry. Maybe just to quickly follow on from what Ian mentioned there about both being able to capture data very, very quickly and also have accurate data. So you see here for question 2, things that are particularly important to speed and efficiency, as well as accuracy and quality. And the kind of fusion of both of those things is definitely the aim for NavVis. So the use of control points, incredibly accurate LiDAR data, and while still being 10 times faster than traditional static scanning is kind of where we see ourselves. But sorry to talk over you, Andy, I'll let you finish your point as well.
No, I was going along the same sort of lines really. For a number of years now, you know, people have been looking for the speed of mobile mapping, but with the sort of quality of data you get from terrestrial scanning, and that clearly is shown in question 2 there. And hopefully that's what we're bringing to the table with the VLX and with IVION.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I really appreciate everybody's effort. Yeah, come on, Matt. Yeah, jump in.
What would have been really good to know on the question 1 is to know people's sort of industry background. I'm guessing quite a lot of those yeses are probably from design based, but where those in the States might be, because this is scan and sort of mesh conversions and everything like this for capture of existing is going to be very, very interesting in the next few years. So it'd been good to know for that actually, in the future maybe. Yeah.
Okay. I'll move on then, unless John, you've got anything to add to that.
No, I guess I was surprised by the sort of scan to BIM. Obviously, we do a huge amount of that in the UK. There's a massive amount. We've always got projects ongoing of a variety of scales, because it's, again, very quick way of data capture, and backed up with the IVION with the images. It's a really user-friendly tool, can be carried forward for the redesign. Okay. And I'm surprised by that one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for your comments, and thanks to the attendees for helping us with that registration. Very much appreciated, and I hope that's good feedback for everybody. So what I'd like to do now is just take you through the thank yous. Thanks as ever to our sponsor, O2 Business. We couldn't do this without them. And I'd also like to say, join the conversation. I mentioned earlier that the webinars are made available shortly afterwards. Follow us on social media, and hopefully we can have some engaging conversations. The next thing I want to just mention is the next session is on the 26th of November, and that's BIM models, digital setting out, and verification of the modern construction site. I'm looking forward to that one very much. I'd like to say thank you to everybody that attended the Community Day a couple of weeks back. That was well attended, and thanks very much to our host, Andy. I know you were there, and Matt, you were there, along with Ian and myself, and it was, yeah, a great event. And thanks again to our host, IFS. They put on a fantastic show. Community Days in 22, we've got 24th of February, that's going to be in London, just waiting on details. 9th of June, JCB World Headquarters. Anybody that's attended that with us before, that's a fantastic venue, and we'll promise something very special this time. So please mark that in your calendars. And then we've got one in Milton Keynes on the 6th of October. So I've nothing else to add. I did have this marked as extra time, but I think we've just encroached into that by 5 minutes. So all that's left for me to say is thanks to everybody for participating and joining us today. for your fabulous questions. Thanks to the panelists, thanks to Mike, to John, Andy, Matt, and thanks to Ian. I'd also like to say thanks to Jerry, who couldn't join us today. Jerry does an awful lot behind the scenes and is usually on every call, but Jerry's been in hospital today for an operation, a routine operation. She's fighting fit, she's messaged us already, and she'll be back on the next one, hopefully. So thanks to Jerry. So if there's anything else, if there's nothing else, I'll close out. But is any last comments? I'm going from left to right now. Mike, anything from you?
I'd just say, yeah, thank you to everybody that's joined the call, asked questions, and everyone else that's been a panelist as well.
Brilliant. John?
Yeah, thanks very much. It's good for you to listen to us. And as I say, we're a big fan of NavVis as a survey company. So get out there and at least try it, if not buy one.
Okay. Over to you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Just a big thank you to yourself and to the guys at COMIT for hosting and allowing us the opportunity to present. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, great to have you. And Matt, anything from yourself?
No, thank you very much. Very enjoyable. Really enjoyed it. And next time I'm going to get more rum.
Brilliant. And Ian, final words.
Just to say thank you very much for everybody coming along today, listening and also presenting. Some really cool stuff. And if you want to share something with the community, if you want to talk about something, if you want to get involved, please do get in touch with either myself or Stuart. You are more than welcome to be a part of the COMIT team. So I shall hand you back to Stuart.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again to everybody. May I wish you all a great weekend, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Take care. Have a good one.
Cheers. Bye-bye.